Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio.
I'm lucky enough to have with me someone who had an experience with a younger Sasquatch and interacted with them quite a few times until they weren't around each other anymore. But I'll let him tell you this whole story. And so let me welcome onto the show Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how you doing, Duke?
Doing good, buddy.
You good?
Yeah, I'm glad I had a chance to talk to you about this and that you contacted me. And, also really glad that you're willing to come on the show and talk about this, because this is the kind of story that most people just will absolutely not share. Most people don't believe there even is Bigfoot, much less that somebody could actually interact with one.
Well, like I told you, it took me over 30 years to even tell anybody about any of this. And, it's so happy that I finally heard some of your guests, and it's like, holy cow, I'm not the only one, at least when they think that I'm lying through my teeth or I'm insane, and I'm going to be in good company, it seems like, because I'm not the only one. But I couldn't tell anybody, because who's going to, it sounds so outrageous, but
right.
Now it doesn't, and
before we go on any further, before we go on any further with your account and your encounters, one thing that you brought up that really fascinated me was that you had just listened to the show with Kat not very long ago, and that a bunch of the words that she was giving for their language were the same thing that you had heard your Sasquatch say, although it sounds like you have a little bit different accent. Can you tell us about that again? Yeah,
well, some of the words that she said, it's like us. Somebody from back east, like New York, if they talk like their nose is stuck up in the air, hey, how you doing? And then somebody from Texas has that southern drawl. I think that they are the same way. And the words that she was saying, I recognized. It's just they sounded a little different, and I think it's just like us with a regional dialect or,
an accent.
Yeah, regional accent. That's what I meant.
Yep. Yeah, it would not surprise me at all. What does surprise me is it seems like they're using the same language all over the place. Now, your whole experience has happened right over next door here in Idaho. That's the state right next to where I am. For you guys that aren't quite aware of where the Duke broadcasts from, I'm in Montana. And Idaho is right next door to us, and it's the land of spuds and lots of mountains and wilderness and lots of animals and Bigfoot and some crabby ones. And if you guys remember, if you ever heard the story from the wilderness hunter that Teddy Roosevelt was talking about, that one happened over there in Idaho.
Yep. So, largest primitive area in the country. And
there you go.
No roads, no motorized vehicles. You got to get back there. You can take a jet boat or a small plane or helicopter, but no motorized vehicles on the ground, horse or foot or mule, but the whole center section of the state is all primitive area, no roads or nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, the northern part of it's pretty well desolate, too. There's not a whole lot of people up there either. No little smokestack and your little chimney up there going, pushing the smoke up toward Canada or whatever it is that it's doing.
I think that's because Lewis and Clark were smoking too much peyote and give half our state to you Montanans.
No, that was a land grab by Montana. I actually looked that up, and, that was one of their stipulations for joining the Union was they wanted this gigantic chunk of land that just happened to be part of what Idaho was supposed to be. And so that's why Idaho is sort of square looking.
And I told you when I was a kid, when we was up on the border, I'd go over to the Montana side and grab big rocks and bring them back to the Idaho side, making my state bigger. Things kids think about and do. I'm going to give us more land. One rock at a time.
Well, I can't blame Montana for doing it because, by and large, most of the really, I shouldn't say all of it, but most of the really nice parts of Montana are sort of in that area that they sort of grabbed from.
Yeah, the only beautiful part of Montana, where you live, that should have been Idaho.
Yeah, technically I would be in Idaho if it had been what they were originally looking at for borders out here in the West.
Yeah, that instead of having that saddle, Idaho would have went straight up to Canada, and Missoula and your state capital would have been in Idaho. All of that right through there, Idaho would have been a big rectangle instead of a messed up frying pan.
Well, what was your first experience that the first time you had any idea that there might be such a thing as Bigfoot?
No, well, that was, I think it was my first year of hunting, and I was 14. And if some people might recognize this, and that's all I'm going to say, but my dad and me and my brothers were up on there's a road that runs all the way across the top of a ridge from one side of the valley to the other where I grew up. It's called we just call it the Ridge Road. But we was dropped off. My dad dropped me off, or one of my brothers first, then about 1.5 miles, 2 miles down the road. And, this isn't a 2-lane blacktop. This is, way up in the mountains, and it's
dirt road, single lane dirt road, pretty much.
Yeah, I think there has never been a road grader on it, and we smoothed out a couple spots with shovels a few times, but he dropped me off, and then he went down 1.5 miles or so and dropped another brother off. And he could drop down on the backside, about, as the rock falls about 500-600 yards down the mountain, and there was a trail down below there. He was going to drop us off. It was early in the morning. When we left the house, it was, still way before daylight. So when we got up there, it was still right at the sun starting to come up, but, it wouldn't actually be in the sky for about another 45 minutes. That's when he dropped us off. And he was going to drive around. It would have taken him about a half hour to get back down there and try to push something up to us. We all found a nice spot. And where the road was, I walked up the embankment, was about 6-7 feet, and then up the little hill up to the top of the ridge, and found a nice clump of rocks right at the edge of the trees, to where I felt had rocks right behind my back and some trees, and if something's going to come up, I'd kind of hidden, so if it comes up, I'd have a good vantage point all at, the little saddle of the ridge. I was up a little higher on one side of it, and so I just sat there, and this is way before cell phones and everything, so, ain't playing the game on a phone like the kids nowadays do. I was actually dozing off, but I heard something coming up from the bottom. It's like, oh, mercy, that sounds like a whole herd, but it sounded like a freight train just moving up through, and it's like, man, that's coming straight up. That stuff is rough on that side. You couldn't walk in a straight line 15 feet because that's how thick the forest was, but something was coming up there in a hurry and wasn't being quiet about it.
So what do you think at that point? It was like a moose or a bear or something? Because I was thinking moose. Because where we were at was deep enough back away from town, but it was either a big old huge bull or a moose. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, neither one of them are going to be afraid of me. But just kept hidden, and sure enough, come up over top of the ridge was bull elk. Nice. Small bull. He has a spike, but still, Idaho, that spike elk was bigger than the elk in Colorado that's 15, 16 years old. Yeah. But, little young bull, he's probably his second year, but he's still probably 400 pounds. But come up over there, and right as he got to the top of the ridge, he made eye contact with me, and it's like, didn't make sense because that stinking thing turned and come at me. And it's like, they usually run when they see a human. And they run away from the human, not toward them.
Yeah, not get closer to me. And it wasn't like to gore me or anything. It's just, he's like, well, I know now he was giving what was coming up after the hill after him a choice. Look at that, slow moving elk or this fast one here that's going to be gone. And, I didn't know that at the time, but that confused me because I could have reached out and touched the side of that thing. It came by so close. And it was lathered up. It had been running. It had been moving and working hard, not just for a few minutes, for a few seconds. This thing was dang near wore out. I don't know if you've ever seen like a horse when they get sweaty. The elk and deer, you can tell that they're sweating, but it's not the same thing. You can tell, but he's blowing big old huge clouds of steam out of his nose and huffing and puffing, and he bounds down the hill, jumps off that little embankment on the road, hits the middle of the road, and is gone. And as I'm watching him steadily motivate, something came up that draw right after it, making about twice as much noise. That's what I was hearing, not that young bull. and I didn't realize that till that bull was gone, and that sound never stopped, and it kept coming up the hill.
Oh, my God. So at that point, then you're thinking, well, what the hell is chasing him up the hill?
Well, I was still thinking, holy cow, he got a big bull after him? Here's young Spike thinking he's a tough guy, and, the big, 6 or 7 point is, that's 6 on one side, not like in, we're real men, we only count one side, the lesser of the time. But that's what I thought, and then it's like, holy cow, am I going to get to see a big bull? I haven't.
Yeah.
I was really close, and
him up whatever's chasing him up the hill's got to be big.
Yeah, well, it's scaring something that's 400 pounds and can move like, faster than any horse, and through the trees like that. And I didn't know enough to get scared at that time. I was hunting deer. I was a kid. First year of hunting season, I had a pretty good shot, but it never even occurred to me that whole time. I'm just sitting there gawking, and then right as I'm like, cool, there's going to be a bigger one come up, and man, that thing was that close. This one's going to be that close, and something, the biggest thing that I'd ever seen in my life come up, and all I'd seen was its head and shoulders, and it come up. And it never made it all the way to the top. I never saw from its knees down, so I couldn't tell you if it was a Bigfoot. I never saw its feet. But where I was sitting and that young bull come up over the top of the ridge, that thing was right there, and I was probably 5 or 6 feet above that on some rocks. Mm-hmm. And when that thing stopped, with its knees, even with the top of the ridge, I still had to look up to look it in the eye.
Oh, God.
And
how far away from you was you?
From here to the end of my drive, 20, 25 yards max, probably less. Yeah,
that's close.
Yeah, well, forest, I had a good vantage spot that if anything was going to come up, it had to go right through there. I grew up in Idaho, even though it's my first year hunting with a license and tag, but I'd been with my family. I grew up in the mountains, all over. And that didn't make sense. That, I didn't think Bigfoot. I was like, what is that? Like Wes Germer says on his, he's like, what he was thinking was monster. That's all that could pop into my head. That there's a monster right there, and it's huge. And if you've never seen one, and people are like, why didn't you look at it through your scope? Well, I didn't need to. He's right there. Second off, and with what I had a hot rod hunting rifle. It's a 7mm Audi. 7mm with a 308 case neck down for a 7mm. It'll reach out in there and touch you. And with what I had in that gun and the way they were loaded, I think all I would do is make him mad, if it even affected that thing at all. Yeah. It was, and what I noticed right when it comes up, and it put on the brakes and stopped right there and looked me right in the eye, give me a once up and down, and that's what I noticed immediately was, holy crap, that thing is not an animal, it's calculating. It gave me the once over to see. Does that make sense? It gave me the once over to see how much of a threat I was to it. Yeah. And
did he give you the surprised look when he first saw you? Because I got that from the Wendigo when I saw him. That was the first thing that registered on his face was, oh, he saw me.
Yeah. He's like, it was what I think from the expression it gave me, which wasn't a lot right then, but it's like, holy crap, what is a human doing there? And I'm like, holy crap, what is a monster doing right there?
So you guys both had that moment of being startled by each other, for sure.
If I wouldn't have been sitting on the rocks and my butt taking such a huge bite out of that rock, I would have shot myself.
Wow.
But, it's hard to explain to people that have never seen one. It's life-changing. This, I've heard people say it before, you're told from the time that you're an infant by your parents that there's no such thing as monsters, there's no boogeymen, and guess what? In the blink of an eye, all of that comes flooding to you like, that's a lie. There's monsters right there. There's a monster right there. What is that? Yep. You could take the biggest human being, Andre the Giant. This thing could squish him like a grape.
Yep.
And what the thing that after I saw the calculating and noticed that this thing has got a severe degree of intelligence. That's me, the older me now talking, but I recognize that this thing is intelligent there. And what I noticed was in its right hand, it was carrying a rock, like Michael Jordan or any of the basketball players, how they palm a basketball.
Yeah.
It's carrying a rock like that is probably 3 times the size of a watermelon, and it's palming it.
God.
And it's like, and that's when I'm like, that rock is probably about as big as my torso, probably, 150 plus, and he's carrying it like I would a softball.
Wow.
And it's like, and the thing that it's like, now I know why he's like, oh crap, there's a human there. It's like, he's doing the same thing I'm doing. But he's like, and Andre the Giant and Princess Bride, when he chucked the rock, I didn't have to miss. And I get the idea that if he was to chuck that rock, it wasn't going to miss. I don't know, but that's what I felt. If he would have got a shot at that young bull right when he got to the top of the ridge, that's when I think he's going to let that thing loose. And here I am, standing there, and he's like, and I screwed it up. This is happening, I'd say tops 20 seconds, but, everything slows down, and it took an eternity. And I know I put my hand up, and it's like, I don't remember if I said any. I think I did. It's like, this ain't for you, meaning my gun. The barrel's in the crook of my left arm. I didn't put it up to my shoulder, but it looked at that, and it recognized that. When it gave me the once over, it lingered on my rifle for maybe half a second or more, but enough I saw that he looked at my rifle and knew exactly what it was. And then that once over, you could see him look at my hip, and there's a 357 on my hip. He recognized both of them instantly. And they know exactly what those are. And, I'm just sitting there, and it's like, I'm just hunting like you are, or something like that. I don't remember. Remember, this has been 35 plus years ago. If I said anything at all, I'd probably thought that I was talking, but going blah, 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 blah. And then it takes the rock, it lifts its arm up from its side, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it put its arm out to its side that had the rock in it, and it just kind of pushed it away with its fingertips. It was palm down still, but just kind of flicked it away, and that rock flew across that little ravine right there at the top of that ridge and hit the side of the mountain on the other side, which is probably 70 yards away, and he just flicked it.
Oh, God.
Didn't rear back and float. He flicked it with his fingertips, and that big old huge rock went like a bullet, from his fingertips. I can't imagine him throwing it. And,
you can imagine whatever critter it hits is going to be dead, though.
Well, that bull elk was, probably 4 times the size of me, and so you use the projectile that's going to take it out. Anywhere he was to hit that bull elk with that, it would have put it down. If you hit it in the back hip, it would have shattered its hips and its backbone. You hit it in the head, it goes down. He hit it anywhere with that rock, that thing's going down. But after he turned it away, he looked back at me again, and then he lifted both. He made 2 fists, and that's when I got terrified. I mean, no words to describe the fear, but made 2 fists and kind of like flexed. And as he turned around, he went, and turned around and walked back down and disappeared. Like, as in, not that, he didn't fade away or anything. He walked down the hill, and I wasn't going to walk back over there and watch him leave. He turned around and walked back down the hill. And the impression that I got was, I don't want to, expletive 4-letter F word, when he did the raw, it's like frag.
Yeah.
And it was just a frustrated roar. It wasn't angry. It was terrifying, but the impression that I got was it was like, you're an idiot. You're a jerk. You just took my breakfast away.
Why did you have to be sitting right there at that juicy elk just about bagged?
Yeah, and why did you have to come up that hill and destroy my world?
Yeah.
And make me, and You know, like I told you, I didn't realize how much keeping that in for so long and never telling a soul that how much it affects you. And having the people like you guys out there that no judgment, just let somebody come on and no ridicule or anything. If I would have, we had the town drunk in my hometown, and I don't want to say his name, but guess what? He said that a Sasquatch pushed a tree over on him. He wasn't the town drunk until after he told the town that a Sasquatch pushed a tree over on him. They were relentless and merciless in the ridicule.
Yeah.
You know, and it led him to be the town drunk. Everybody said, oh, don't listen to that old man, he's the town drunk. Well, he wasn't the town drunk till you guys started teasing him and ridiculing him about something that he saw. I went and talked to that old man. Mm-hmm. Because of my family's reputation. There's a restaurant, a little greasy spoon that he always hung out at. And I went by, saw him in there one morning, went over, and I asked him, said, can I ask you a couple questions? And he said, just leave me alone. And I said, well, if you look up, you'll recognize who I am, and, I'm not going to be like that. I said, I just want to know if what you saw is the same thing I saw. And he looked up at me, and it's like, holy crap. I think that's the first time anybody had said something like that to him. And then it wasn't right then, but we talked later that afternoon away from there so nobody in town could see. But just then, real quick in passing, I just want to know if what pushed that tree over on you is what I just saw a couple days ago. Because I'm terrified. I said, you have no idea. This thing was very conservative, but 11 foot.
Good God.
Remember, I didn't see from its knees down, and where I was at was about 5 feet up from there. I wasn't totally standing, but I wasn't sitting either. It's when you're leaning against rocks, so my knees are bent a little bit, but where my feet are is 5 feet above, the top of that ridge, so I'm up the ridge a little bit more. And that thing comes up there, and he's still, from his knees down, is below the ridge, and I still have to look up to him to meet his gaze. And, I've heard people say, well, I weigh 200 pounds, and I look down, and it's like, well, I'm 360, and you're a lot bigger than me. I'm a pretty good judge of weight. That thing, minimum. I think I said 750, but I'm going to raise that. I think a minimum of 1,200. And minimum of 11 foot. But I wouldn't be surprised if it tipped the scale at 3/4 of a ton and 13.5.
Well, if you think of how big the bull elks and stuff are up here, they'll go over 1,000 pounds. And that's not nearly as big of a mass as a 9, 10, 11 foot tall Bigfoot is. So, ton easily, I could believe at that height.
Yep. Now, I've heard the different types, and, I've researched Bigfoot as much as I could. The internet's a godsend too. Tried researching Bigfoot before the internet days. There's a couple of blurbs in a newspaper article that is making fun of somebody that saw one, but people nowadays don't know how much the information age is amazing for stuff like that, for research.
Yeah.
But
for decades there was no organization to contact. There was nobody you could talk to. There was no shows you could go on. There was no place you could tell your story. There wasn't any social media. And, if you wanted to research it, there weren't even Bigfoot conventions, dude.
Yeah.
You had to go buy a book somewhere where you could find a book that somebody had written on Bigfoot. And there weren't a whole lot of those.
Well, and anybody you ask, like, if you've been listening to the Village Idiot, the Town Drunk, and it's like, what? And if you would have asked me before that day, just because of everything that I'd been raised around, just that, in a small Idaho town, my first year hunting, but you have no idea how I was in the woods, and I was pretty good. I was a pretty good tracker. Spent a lot of time in the woods, a lot of time in the woods on my motorcycle by myself, even back then when I was a kid. There wasn't a video arcade. Our closest McDonald's was where you live over in Montana. That's how rural my hometown was. We had to go to Montana to eat at McDonald's.
That's right. Montana rules. We got McDonald's.
When I was a kid, McDonald's was a treat. Red Lobster, McDonald's, French
Idaho's so far out in the sticks, it's a suburb of Montana.
Yeah.
But seriously, now back to the poor guy who had been totally ostracized and become the town drunk, and compared to your stories, is the thing that he saw the same as what you saw?
It's very similar. I don't think it was the same one, different areas. And his was over on, that gets into a whole nother set of encounters with something else on the other side of the valley on the Montana side. I was on the backcountry side of Idaho side when I saw this one.
Mm-hmm.
And if we remember, I told you about the ones that I found on my dirt bike about a year after some stuff happened, and the ones that used to chuck rocks at us.
Mm-hmm.
That's over on that. That's where he was at. Was over on that side, and that's the one that he said pushed the tree over on him. But very similar.
Okay. So that was over by the Montana border. That was on Montana side.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's drinking that bad Montana water.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And like I've been saying for a long time, Montana's got some of the most crabby Sasquatches in the entire continent.
Yes,
the one Texas beat.
the ones on that side, what I've found over the years, I lived in that small little town for dang near 20 years, and the ones on the Montana side, up on the Continental Divide that way, they were more aggressive. They were the same, I think, type, or if they're not the type, they're the two that look very similar, but they're two totally different creatures. Two totally different beings, however you want to say that. I don't think they're an ape. I was asked that, and I said the only thing that made me think ape was it was covered with hair, not fur. Right. But the one you saw had a face more or less like a human then. Yeah, it looked like, some of the cartoons of the guy chewing on the cigar with a big old huge gun, some of the animated shows that aren't really for kids, but they're cartoons still. Put that grizzled old warrior, soldier's face, put a bunch of hair around it, and he didn't have a sagittal crest either. That's what the pointed part, right? It was more rounded. I didn't see a point, and it was kind of balding on top, but kind of had a balding mullet looking thing. Longer in the back, no neck to speak of. That was typical. His trapezius, where his weightlifters call it their frog neck. His frog neck was the best frog neck I'd ever seen in my life. Big old huge trapezius muscles, and this even under the hair you could see the muscles. I mean, when he's just holding that rock, it's like, man, the muscles are just. I started weightlifter, football player. And, ever since I was little, was in the gym and knowing what the different deltoids, the biceps and all of that. And it was like, they were abnormally large. Yeah. They already got a short, teeny neck that you can barely even see. And then the traps are so built up, it looks like it goes up to their ears, basically. Yeah, it looks like the step pyramids. Here's the trapezius and then a little bit smaller peak, and it's the head. It is. I don't think it's that there's no neck. I think it's that the neck is shorter, but the muscles are so huge. Yeah. And his eyes were, all I saw was black, but that's what got me the most was the intelligence in its eyes, and knowing that even though I couldn't, I could see exactly where it's looking, even though there's no whites and it's just a black spot, but you knew exactly where he's looking. And what color hair did he have? Was he a dark hair one? It was like the dark auburn. He was very dark, but had kind of the reddish, almost like maroon highlights. Okay. But that could have been the orange morning sun coming up over the mountains too, because where we have clean air, it's not foggy looking from the pollution, but a sunrise is nice bright orange on a good nice day. Right. And now, is that me seeing a lot of the orange from the sky, or was it actually that color? But you had dark brown, really dark, and I can see why, in a forest where there's a lot of shade and a lot of dark spots, how, he could, if I would have been walking by there and he is standing right there, if he didn't move, there'd probably be You know, if I did none of the noise and everything, if I was just walking down that ridge and he stood right there, there'd be a 75% chance I would have never saw it if I just walking by, if it didn't move. And this thing is, you know, as big as my Tahoe.
I know, it's just scary how damn sneaky they are. They're gigantic and yet they're incredibly sneaky. It doesn't seem like the two should actually go together, but they do.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that one, but, you know, later on I found out that, you know, who Usain Bolt is. Your average tubby Sasquatch could catch him in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
The fastest human being on the planet can't hold a candle to your average Sasquatch in speed. Now,
well, let's get to how you found out this sort of stuff now, because that's the next thing that comes up after you had this unfortunate encounter while out hunting and had the big boy at the rock run into you. Why don't you just let us know how this all happened with this other situation where you ended up actually being able to interact with one of them?
Okay. Well, you know, that it's a long story. We got a little bit of time.
We got plenty of time. Go ahead.
Yeah, because, you know, like I told you, there's a lot to it, and we just barely scratched it. But okay, well, you know, that year, I don't want to tattle on myself, but back then, you know, we didn't have the tree stands that you go down and buy, and you unfold it, and it goes 30 feet up the tree, and you put a strap around it and lock. You know, I had a milk crate that I strapped to the back fender of my motorcycle, my trail bike, and one to the front, and I made 6 or 7 trips up. And I'd, you know, scrap lumber, go to the lumber store and get any of the spare 2x4s and stuff. And I would go up and I'd find a spot and I'd make a tree stand 35, 40 feet up a tree. And in a spot that you couldn't see from the road, you know, I'd ride deer trails on my bike. I'd had a couple spots picked out, but I built the next year, starting in the spring, I built 4 tree stands, all in different parts of, you know, the mountains. There's 2 in this one particular area, and you know there's this one good meadow that I found that I knew had a lot of activity. I could see, you know, a lot of sign, and I built a tree stand in a Douglas fir on one side, on the uphill side of it, and then I built one in a big huge, wasn't a Douglas fir, irregardless, one down on the downhill side on the opposite side of the meadow, and you know, about 7 trips per stand. You know, I didn't have a ladder. What I got was the big huge, you know, it's basically just a big nail, but it's, you know, 3/4 of an inch around and about 2 1/4 feet. There's $1.50 a piece. That was a lot of money back then too. Yeah. It was all out of my pocket, but I'd get, you know, as far apart as I could get them, pound them into the tree about halfway, and, you know, I'd have about a foot sticking out, and I'd climb up and make a frame. You know, however wide the tree was, I'd pound a 2x4 in on either side of the tree and then brace it down, and I'd make it to where I could sleep up there. It was a pretty nice tree stand. Nice. I'd make a platform, and then I'd put 1x4s, you know, about an inch apart, and make a deck on it, and then I'd put 2x4s up and a rail up about 8 to 10 inches up from the bottom of it, so I could actually sleep up there, you know, not stretch totally out, but I would always strap myself up to the tree when I'd sleep. But a couple of times, many times I'd slip in the tree stand that I'd built. But it was the next year, and before, you know, by the middle of summer, I had 4 good stands made, and I wanted to try one of them 2 first, and No, okay. So this wasn't. It was late archery season. Excuse me. The early archery season, I didn't actually get to, and I didn't get a deer during rifle season. So it's late archery. Excuse me. I had to think about that for a second. So this is late January, early February, middle of winter, but because I didn't get a deer during rifle season, I think I kind of intentionally did that because I wanted to go up and spend a night or 2 in my stand and see if I could take one with my boat. Kind of
in the middle of the winter. Oh, fun.
Yeah, well, you know, in the middle of winter, that I have the advantage if I'm up there. And if I go up there the night before, and when they're coming up from the river getting a drink, and I've been up there all night, you can't smell me. No. And I'm up there, you know, I'm not 10, 15 feet up. Remember, minimum of 35 or 40 feet up the tree, way up there.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty scary on that one. It was way up there on this first one. But sure enough, now during rifle season, one thing that the Idahoans don't like is people coming from out of state, in the draw areas, and somebody from California drawing an elk, and the people in Idaho getting screwed over for it. So it's nothing against that state. It's just the way that they act when they're in another state doing something like hunting. It's pretty bad that the few that are bad, they give all of them that come up and hunt a bad name. But another story, just real quick. My brother was shot at. He killed a deer, and 3 guys from California started shooting in the general direction, trying to run him off because it was his last day of deer season, rifle season. And it's stuff like that. I'm not blaming the whole state, but that's the reputation that they had. But so during rifle season, there's a rumor around town that these guys from California had killed a male and a female Sasquatch. And it was squashed pretty quick because they said there was a new fish and game officer at one of the checkpoints. Thought it'd be funny to say that these guys from California, killed a male and a female Bigfoot thinking they were bears, and that was how it was played off, and it got squashed pretty quick. So, and everybody heard about that, but then you mention it and it's like, oh, that was that idiot new fish and game officer thinking he's funny. But, and I didn't know what, anytime you come out of the mountains during hunting season in Idaho, there's a checkpoint. And if you're hunting, if you've got something or not, you got to stop. So, but I didn't have to because I didn't drive on the road in a truck. I took my motorcycle, and it is winter time, and luckily it wasn't super deep, but I had studded snow tires that I'd made out of sheet metal screws to help it get a little bit better grip. As a country kid, we didn't have video arcades. We had to. Anyway, I went up there and parked my bike and climbed up there. Now, let me back up a bit. As I was building these 2 tree stands at this meadow, I had the base built and the spikes up to the top of the tree, and I needed to go back to town and get another load. And so I left my backpack up there. And it had, some granola bars, had a bag of beef jerky, deer jerky every year in my family. When we'd always get several deer. One of them would turn into deer jerky, and that was always in the freezer. And you'd go on a, next year hunting or anything you do, you always take a, 1 pound bag of jerky. And I rode back to town on my bike. It'd take me about an hour and a half to get back to town, an hour and a half to get back there. That's a kid on a dirt bike up on deer trails. It's quite a ways back away from town.
Yeah.
But when I got back there, my backpack was on the ground. And I thought, there's no coons up here. There's little critters that could get into it, but they would have tore through the sides, or, if there's a porcupine, they can climb a tree, but, something unzipped the zipper and got in there, and anything that wasn't to eat, all my granola bars, I had some of the atomic fireballs, they were gone. I found 2 or 3 of them just on the ground, right around the bottom of the tree. You remember those, the little red, cinnamon flavored atomic fireballs, and and it just struck me as odd that if it was a bobcat or a cougar or a porcupine or something like that, it would have torn my backpack up, but it was unzipped and just the food was taken out of it, so I knew it wasn't a person. I had everything hidden to where, you could walk right underneath my tree stand, and if I was quiet, you probably wouldn't know I was up there. But it just struck me as odd. And then, that was probably middle of the summer when that happened. And then I got it finished, and I didn't go back there because I wanted the animals to get used to, here's my scent all around it, building it. And then I wanted it to be totally free. And then during hunting season, that's when I'd go back. And, I didn't get anything during rifle season. And late archery is when I went up there. I spent the night, and at the crack of dawn, right as the sun's starting to come up, I heard movement. And sure enough, that right as I figured, them deer were coming right up through that meadow. They'd been right down at the the river drinking, and now the sun's coming up. They're going back up to hide and bed down for the day. And right as they got to the edge of the meadow, I'd had everything, in summer, I had everything ticked off. I had all my pins on my sights lined up. And right as he stepped right by that one tree down there, that pink pin, and boom, dropped one right there. Perfect shot. You never knew what hit him. And the other ones looked at him like, what's Bob doing laying on the ground? But, my string was silenced. It just barely made a twang. It had a 90-pound compound that had been cammed up to about 115. It had Easton game getter arrows. They were the 3-pronged broadheads that when they impact, 3 more blades shoot out, aimed the back way.
Right.
And that arrow went through him, went through his heart, went through the other side, and pinned him to the ground. And it wasn't until I got down out of the tree and got over there that the other ones are like, I guess we should run now. But I drug him farther back, planned on staying there a day or two. And that's, one night and the very next morning, I hadn't even been there 24 hours, and I already got one. So I drug it to the other side of the meadow, and then I hung that thing up. I hung it probably about 35, 40 feet in the air. So a bear, a lion comes, and the rope is tied. I had spikes up to where I had tied it up in the tree, so an animal wouldn't be able to get it when it's hanging there. They might be able to get underneath of it, and I know bears can jump, and mountain lions can too, but they couldn't jump that high. And I steadily farted around. I rode my bike a little bit until I just had enough gas. I always carried, in my milk crate, I carried 3-quart oil jugs full of gasoline, and it took me 2 of them to get back to town. So when I was out of gas and all I had was those 2 left, that's when I rode back. I just exploring. It was a nice day. That next day, the day that I killed that, it was just a little 3-point buck, 3 on one side, 2.5 on the other, about 190 pounds or so, probably 3-4 years old. Nice deer. And nighttime came, and I was tuckered out, had fun. The big old huge adrenaline rush right in the morning, and now it's sunset, and my adrenaline dumped a long time ago, and I was tired. And I climbed up there, got into my sleeping bag, tied myself in, to the tree stand, and fell asleep. And I woke up to what sounded like somebody, like somebody frustrated, throwing a fit, but kind of quietly. Here I am. I don't know what time it is. Timex Indiglo watches hadn't been invented yet. And, a nice bright moon, and there's snow on the ground, so what little bit of moonlight did reflect pretty good, too. And I see somebody standing underneath my deer, jumping up, trying to get at it, and just crying and throwing a fit. They can't get to it, and they'd go over to the tree over there and look, and just standing underneath of it, whining, crying, throwing a fit, and it's like, you jerk. That's mine. You get away from there. And it's like, what's this? I'm going to scare the crap out of whoever this is. And I, slowly, luckily my tree stand didn't creak or the rungs to get up it. I got over on the back side of the tree, went down, got to the ground, and I took off running as fast as I can. What the hell do you think you're doing? That's holy crap. That's not a man. And then I'm got wool socks on, boxer shorts, my camo pants and everything. It was a warm night. I had a Sub-Zero mummy bag, and it's like, my pistol's up there, so's my bow, and I'm standing here in a T-shirt and boxer shorts and wool socks, and that's not a man.
Whoop.
And it's like, whoa, stop and turn around, and I think he was it scared the crap out of it, because it turned to me and looks at me like, what in the hell is that? And I'm like, what in the hell is that? And we both turn about face, and he takes off that way, and I go back up the tree. And when I went that, now this is what's weird. That looked exactly like a chimp, only it was a chimp that was a little bit bigger than I was at that time. At that time I was about 6 foot, maybe 260 pounds. I was a big kid at that time. So here I am, and this chimp, I get, what is it, the billy ape? The chimpanzee that's bigger than a human? And when it took off on all fours, and it run just like, National Geographic Channel, when you see a chimpanzee run sideways like that on all fours. and hooting and hollering and screaming. It was doing that, but it was like, ah! What I figured was, holy crap, it saw me. What is that? But it run off that way, and I run back up the tree. And
oh my God, that must have scared the crap out of you. I mean, even after having seen that big one previously, it's still like, well, there you are up there by yourself.
Well,
no gun this time.
No, I didn't think it was the same thing. I really didn't. It's like, crap, there's two different kinds of monsters. No, big. I know chimps aren't that big. That's a chimpanzee, but it's brown, not black, and it's bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of circus freak is that? I've seen the bearded lady. I haven't seen the big 6.5, 7 foot tall chimp. It didn't occur to me that it was. Later on, I found out it was a juvenile Sasquatch. He's probably not an adolescent, but not a teenager either. Kind of right there in that transit. I figure he is about my age. Right. That's the one that I had. Over time, we had a lot of interaction with. And actually, as I got to thinking about it, well, that thing, what happened I did stay 2 more days there. And that thing was always at the edge of the meadow that I was at. And I got down and it stayed the same distance away from me. And the next day, I got over near where the gut pile was. And the gut pile had been devoured. And I saw that, this thing, there's footprints and stuff all around there. I could tell that this thing is eating it. And thinking about it, it's like, oh, crap, that thing's hungry. And it's right then that it clicked. Holy crap. I bet you that's not a rumor. And I bet you $100 this is the child of them two that the Californians supposedly killed. That was a big, hilarious joke. And it right then and right there, it clicked. It's like, and it was confusing and it was heartbreaking at the same time, because now I realized it was starving to death and it was trying to get that, and it was frustration because I hung it up so high that he, now looking back on it, that thing was jumping up there pretty good. If I would have hung it 5 feet lower, he would have got it. But he was going up there. I mean, it put Michael Jordan to shame on his vertical leap. And this is a kid. This is just past toddler, not right teenager. So
you're figuring this guy, the 2 Bigfoot that got shot were his parents, and so now it was an orphan.
Yeah,
that wasn't old enough to know how to fend for itself very well.
Yeah. Now that night, I pulled my deer down and I cut a front quarter off of it, and I set it. There was over there near the gut pile, but closer to me. And I set a front quarter on there, and the sun went down and it's still sitting there, and I knew it was there. I could hear it. I couldn't really see it real good. I knew it was there because I could hear it whining, and it was like, when a dog wants to come and see you, but it's scared because it's not been around humans, but it wants the attention, and it wants to come get that dog treat out of your hand or that, piece of food that you set down there, but it's just too scared to. The whole time until about midnight to 1 o'clock, somewhere in there, it's when he finally give in and come over and grab that. And didn't even wait to get back out of the clearing to start eating on it. He grabbed it and started eating it right then, and then back to where it was.
Oh man!
And it was hard. It's hard to explain. At that point, from that point on, it was no longer scared. I felt sorry for it because I'm like, if somebody killed my parents, how would I fend for myself? Yeah, and I don't know why. Here I am, what am I, 15, 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Yeah, if it was around your size, it was probably more like the human equivalent of like a 10 or a 12-year-old. So imagine like a 10-year-old trying to fend for himself if both his parents got killed.
Yeah, and, I didn't know it, but later on what I found out is they did. They got a male and a female and infant, because it was then after I got back to town from that, what I told you about happened right after that, after I got back to town.
Right.
That's when that happened. And, so that rumor, it was, when I saw that, it was maybe a week after that, or less than a week after that rumor got started that I had that very first encounter with that one. And over the course of after I killed that deer, the next 2.5, almost 3 full days and nights, it's when I stayed there. And, I got in trouble for missing a day of school, but it's a small town, and, hunting season, you're giving up the 2 weeks. That's just, I didn't ask for it off. I was supposed to be back on that day, but, small town. I gotta, just make sure you tell us next time. Did you get something? Okay. Well, yeah, you did. All's forgiven. Yeah, because I got one. Different era, different time, different place. Tell you it's a different era. In my high school, there was probably 350 rifles out in the vehicles in the parking lot. And when 2 kids got in a fight, did anybody go to the truck and get a gun? Or your hunting knife? No, they stayed there. You settle it like 2 men if you're going to settle it. And that you don't ever do that. I mean, now if you go to school and you accidentally have your hunting rifle, your shotgun, and your buck knife in your vehicle, they're going to haul you to jail. But
when I was in high school, we had shotguns in our lockers because there was skeet shooting class after school.
Yeah. Now, where do you want me to go from that? It gets into...
Well, after you spent your initial weekend with them up there and fed them, did you see any more of them? I mean, did he haul like that quarter off and eat it somewhere else, or what did he do?
Yeah, well, that's why I stayed the extra day. By the end of that, it actually made physical contact. And this is where it gets incredible. It was...
Well, how did that happen then?
Well, the next night, I baited him a little bit closer with the other front quarter and got him about half the distance from where the previous night was with another quarter. And, that was the thing that was impressive, was how much that thing ate me. Is still starving to death. But it was, you could tell it was thankful, and he was still hungry, so I put it out there the next night. But halfway closer, it didn't take him right as the sun went down is when he grabbed that one, and then he didn't go into the trees. He sat at the edge of the tree, and I sat on the ground. That whole day, I didn't go up in the stand. The whole time, I was on the ground. And you know what I mean? I didn't.
Yeah.
And my bow and everything was up there, and it's like, crap. If I don't want him to be scared of, I don't know if his parents got shot with a rifle or if he saw it, or, all of this going through my head. It's like, from the time that I put 2 and 2 together, I felt sorry for him, and I wanted to, you take the lost puppy home with you.
Yeah.
If my mom would have let me, I would have taken him home just like a pup. But I knew that there's no way that I can tell anybody about this.
No.
Because of what I
friends won't believe you. Next thing you know, you'll be living under the bridge with the guy that had the Bigfoot pushy tree over on him.
Yep. And so the next night is when I had one of the other hindquarters. All I went to town with, when I went back to town, was a hindquarter. And I said, well, that's all I could get out. That it was really rough, and I cut it up into quarters. And the next night when I went to get it, the rest of it had been, gotten to by critters. So all I got to town with was one hindquarter. But the next night it was, or after that night to where he was closer, and he didn't hide from me that night. It was the rib cages, and I cut them up with a good knife. Well, not just a whole rib cage slab. I'd take a rib, and the meat off of it, and I cooked some of them just over my campfire. And I set one out there even closer than where the front quarter was the night before. And the smell of the meat cooking on my campfire, that the beginning of the third day, the second night after, cooked a big old chunk of it for myself, and the smell of it, that was driving him nuts. The smell of that meat cooking was just too much. And by, I'd say 3 or 4 o'clock, he was on the other side of the fire from me, taking it out of my hand. When I cooked the rib and handed it over there, and the first couple, he'd snatch and scoot back 8 or 10 feet, and by the 4th or 5th rib, he was sitting right there and scooting closer to me, waiting for the next one to get done.
Apparently cooked meat tastes a lot better than raw meat.
Yep. Right. He was just, when the smell was just, if they are, they're not exactly human. I don't think they're at all, and I think they're like the Native Americans think. I think they're a type of people. Are they the same as us? No, but they have cognitive thought. They can calculate. They can reason. That's a person. That's not an animal. Something that can outthink you. Something that can flank you. Something that can hide from you. As smart as we think we are. And I know why so many people don't believe in Bigfoot, because they are the world's best at hiding from us. Mm-hmm. Do you blame them? They have had their TV is humans. And look at what humans do to each other. Why would they want to reveal themselves to us? Look at what happened to his parents.
No way. Yeah, we're scary.
Look at what happened to his parents. But it's at the end of that, it was a child. It wasn't an adult Bigfoot. It was still a child or adolescent, whatever you want to call it. And so was I. I wasn't old enough to know that I should be crapping myself that this thing is right there. I didn't know at that point that thing could grab my head and rip it off and rip my arms off and beat me with them. And he's a baby. Well, little past baby. But at that point, me being a big tough kid, me being a big tough kid lifting weights, as tough as I was and as strong as I was, I couldn't hold a candle to this toddler when he was that age. And he was probably 4 inches taller than me, but man, he was at least 250 pounds more. But, the first initial I thought about my size, but their muscles got to be twice as dense as ours. Mm-hmm. And that is it. But, let me tell you, this is what killed me and set me up for how the next 5 years of my life would go. On that last night that I was there, that I had to get back to town the next day. I left the mountain and wound up in the pool from my tree stand that night. That last night there, I spent the night with him, and when we finally touched, he started crying and gave me a hug and latched on and gave me a hug and would not let go for probably 45 minutes and cried just like a little a little kid would. And I started blubbering too. It's like, I know if what I think happened to you, I can't imagine how you're feeling. Yeah. And he would look up at me and cry, and damn it, I'm sorry. Can you imagine putting yourself in his position? And it's not an animal; it's a person.
Mm. Yeah, and his family got murdered, and he's out there all by himself. And he finally found somebody else that isn't trying to hurt him.
I realized that when I was 14 years old. I don't blame him for hiding from us. Look at what happened, what we as humans did to his family.
Yep.
And I just thank God that I'm the one that happened to build my tree stands there at that perfect spot where I knew the deer had come up. And like I said, I didn't know where supposedly this had happened. It was just, I think it was meant to be. I don't think he was starving, totally starving to death, but what he was getting as sustenance was growing rapidly less and less, because in that area he had got every rabbit and squirrel, and it turned out porcupine too, because I picked a couple quills out of him in the middle of that night, and roots and tree bark, and it was the next morning he did not want to let me go. And when I tried to take off a ways, he would follow me, and it's like, oh no, this is bad. I can't let anybody else see him. And right there, that, at twilight till, that 3 to 4 hours to where I've got to be in town, get a shower, and get to school that morning. What I realized how intelligent beings are right then is just amazing. And that's when I learned his name. They have names. That's not an animal. That's a person. He told me his name, and I told him mine. And not in sign language, he said his name, and he said my name, and I said his name. And they said as close as I could get to what it sounded like. And that's not an animal.
No.
Animals don't have a language. Animals don't cry when their mother and father are murdered and their little baby brother or sister. They don't look for affection even on the thing that caused them the most pain.
Yeah.
It was a humans that did that to him, but yet it's a human that he's getting comfort from. And, that broke my heart, and I'm a kid, and, ever since then, that changed my life because, it's hard to explain, but from that day on, I was a different person to people of all races and sizes. And that Sasquatch people, that's a race of people. That's not, I didn't have the same type of interactions with any of the other ones. In fact, we talked about the ones on the Montana side, I wouldn't want to give them a hug.
Yeah, they got a bad reputation, man. I think ones over here drink too much or hung over all the time or something.
If one of them gives you a hug, it would be the hug that, squeezes you in too, like bread dough.
Yeah, make your head pop off.
Yeah. Now, that was what was weird. Is the ones on the other side, those, I can see why you need to be afraid of them. These ones, like him, they're two totally different people. I think he is a person. The other ones, they're more animal-like, and they are terrifyingly, and they are aggressive, and they are eating machines, I think.
Yeah.
And if you are edible, you're on the diet. It doesn't matter how bad you think you are. It doesn't matter if you're a bull elk. It doesn't matter if you're a grizzly bear. It doesn't matter if you're a polar bear. It doesn't matter if you're a whale. I don't know if that had happened, but anything that they can eat, they're going to try to eat. And I guarantee you a human ain't going to stop them from eating it if they want to eat you.
Yeah. No, not even close. There's nothing physically that we could do to stop them other than having a bazooka or a flamethrower handy.
Well, semi-automatic Barrett 50 cal with 300 rounds of depleted uranium, that stuff that'll punch through solid steel. Yeah, you better have a bunch of those and like 20 people shooting at the same time at it to try to slow it down.
Multiple trigger pullers because there's always usually more than one of them around. Well, you're in the weird situation where there is only one of them, so you make contact with Glag, and you end up having to go back to town to go to school. And so the whole week passes, you're in town. You were in town the whole week again, I'm taking it?
Yeah, well, I took off that Friday and was back up there the next, first thing in the morning, Friday morning, because I had chores and stuff that had to be done and work, and then went back up for the next weekend. Well, you already got it here. What are you going for? Well, still hunting season. They don't know I got one at school. So I'm taking 3 more days off school. And now this gets into, man, how do I say this? I had brothers that didn't treat me very well. So any chance I could have to get away from there, it's like when we talk, he saved me and I saved him. Does that make sense? And that
Did you have all older brothers, or were you a middle kid, or what was
I was the youngest. I was the youngest.
You were the youngest. Okay.
I had all 4 of them on me every day.
Oh,
they never fought in amongst themselves. Yep.
Oh,
they never did anything to each other. It was always 4-on-1. And that, at 10 years old, that's an 18-year-old on a 10-year-old. A 16-year-old or 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, all against a 10-year-old. And I would say they did this, or I'd tattle on them. What mom and dad tattling, and the other, all 4 of them say I'm lying. I don't blame my mom and dad. I know it was tough. I now understand now that I'm adult and have children. And looking back with an adult's eye, now I realize what stresses my mom and dad were under back then because of totally different circumstances. But when a kid comes up and starts whining about his brothers being mean to him, and the other brothers say he's lying, and, I don't blame them. It's my brothers for using that situation to their advantage, and the fact that I don't bruise, never have. I have a pain threshold that's through the roof, and it's obvious with the health issues that I have now and what I withstand. But they use that to their advantage because I say they did something. Where's the mark? They could beat the snot out of me, and it wouldn't leave a mark. That's the curse of having the type of heritage that I have, Viking, Scottish, Apache, and a little bit of Cherokee, And so I don't know that mix of genetics and none of it. We don't bring it. Man, you'd have to hit me with a deuce and a half military truck to get me to leave a bruise.
So anyway, no love lost between you and your brothers, and you're more than happy to be spending time away from them.
Yeah, and well, what I said about the intelligence of that person was just astounding, because on the ground by the fire, I drew a box, just with a stick, and I drew a crescent moon, and I pointed at the moon, pointed at the big little box there with the moon, and I said, "That's the moon. That's nighttime." And then I drew another box and drew a round circle with spikes coming off of it, and pointed up in the side in the sky and said, "Sun." And I said, "Night and day, this plus this is one day."
Mm-hmm.
And it only took 10, 12 minutes for him to get the concept down. Okay, when the moon is up and the sun is up, from right now, the sun comes up and then the moon comes up, and then the sun comes up and the moon comes up. That's 2 days. They grasped that concept right away, and I told him I would be back in 4 days. Four suns and 4 nights. On the 5th sun, I would be there on the 5th sun, and I drew a picture of the mountains, and right as it's coming up the mountain, right in the morning, I'd be up there on the 5th day in the morning. And he was right there. When I left where he was at, where I drew the pictures, he was standing there waiting for me when I got there on my bike 5 days later.
Wow.
And then I went into, oh crap, where is he sleeping? We got to find him a place to live. And luckily, knowing, I grew up in the mountains, I knew that. Why I picked that area for my tree stand is I knew that area pretty well. And it's like, there's some caves over there that, and at that time, thank goodness, there was nothing else over there but him, because I can just imagine me going into a cave trying to find him a home, and me and this little guy go in there and have a couple 10-footers in there, wake them up.
Yeah, they really wouldn't like that.
In retrospect, I had 15 or 20 guardian angels watching over me and him both, because we both bumbled through the next 3 years. And just for some reason, both of us made it through. And, I didn't know what habitation was. I didn't know you don't feed the Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Every time I go
at situation, though, if he didn't have some help from you, he might not even have survived.
And that's when I turned into a lawbreaker, but I think for a good reason, because, I don't want to say this. It sounds so bad. I became a poacher, but it was for the right reason. I would, every time I'd go back, I'd kill an animal for him. And it was not wasted at all. It wasn't for a trophy. It wasn't to hang on the wall. It wasn't for anything. It was for food. And I don't think there's anything wrong with anything feeding themselves. I don't think that if somebody is starving to death, if they have 50 cents to go buy a bullet and have a rifle, let them go kill an animal if they're going to eat it. If they go shoot a set of horns to hang on the wall, hang them out to dry. I don't understand how you guys can stand to listen to my voice. I can't stand to hear it recorded. You can tell that guy right there grew up where there's a barn in his yard. Well, I did.
I grew up so far out in the sticks, we didn't have a barn within a mile of us.
Well, we had the Sears catalog in the outhouse for toilet paper.
Oh, Sears catalog, luxury. We had old dried leaves we used. But anyway, getting back to the story here. So you kind of made an arrangement with him. You got enough language between the two of you where he could figure out how long you were going to be gone and when you would come back again.
Yep.
And you went. Did you take him down to the caves? And did he just sort of follow you over there?
I asked him. I said, where do you sleep? And then I laid down and closed my eyes. Like you would, like with a little kid. I put my hands under my head and I laid down and acted like I was asleep. And he's like, and then what I figured out is they talk. Their language, it's like you put it on super fast forward. And I always wondered, I wonder if they have developed their speech into being so fast that humans can't understand them. Because they can definitely understand you. You ask any Native American, if you talk to them in the Native American language from the area that they're at, they can understand you, and a lot of times they can respond to you in that language. Yeah. It's just they have to slow it down. But I just always thought, did they speed up their speech just so we couldn't understand what they're saying? And he would, when he'd get excited, you know, his vocabulary in my language was pretty immense, actually. But by the end, you know, his name was, should I tell everybody what his name was? His name is Glag. That's in how I would spell, you know, there's no dictionary and there's no written language, but you spell it phonetically.
But according to his pronunciation of it, his name was Glag.
Yeah, his name was Glag. It was, and even when he was young, it was Glag.
Glag.
Yep. Yep. And he would call me. Just imagine like a little kid from India, Jimmy, or Terry. But when he had learned the words, what else was it? And I'm trying to think. Tree stand. It was always like when you see a little kid trying to learn words. Sure, ski.
You stress parts of it.
Yep. But in a voice that is way too deep that you, as a human, cannot, and it always got me. It's a little kid, and he's got a deeper voice than I got.
He was so lucky that he ran into you. Any other human, I think, probably would have been bad news for him.
Well, and that's like after that first night when I learned Glag, and, you know, it took forever, you know, what is your name? And then it's like, Kevin. Now, that's my name. And then when he finally got that, it's like, that's when it was Glag, 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 Glag. And it took me forever to, you know, slow down. I think I told you when he had talked, when he'd get excited, he'd go back into that fast speech. And that's what got me is because, you know, figuring out over all of this that he is a young guy, that he is a little kid, but yet he could talk. And that means his family could talk. That means these things have a language that they talk. But then figuring out that, you know, I'd slow down. Kevin. And it'd be like, it just sounded like, you know, the samurai chatter.
Yeah.
And then it's like, yeah. And he'd look at me like, what in the hell are you trying to say? And then he's like, oh, okay. And then slow it down. And then that's when I finally got, after about 2 hours, it's after me telling him Kevin, and then Kevin. Then it was like, okay, then that's when it's like, Glag. And it's like, Glag? Or is it Glag? And he's like, when, you know, Black, you know, Black, Drac, all of these. And then it was when I said Glag. That's when he got excited and right back up this talking on super fast forward. But then, you know, I would, whenever I'd go out there, every spare second that I had from then on until the day that we parted ways, you know, it's from right then, it's like I want him to be able to get back into, you know, I'd never thought about it. I'd seen the Patty film once, you know, and I didn't know anything about him. Like I said, the internet's amazing now. But yeah. I wanted
back then, there was just no, dude, even if you were in a major metropolitan area, the amount of information on these guys was just non-existent. And you were out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And then out in the middle of nowhere from where my town was, you know, and you go about 30 miles past there, and that's where we were. You know, it was, you know, right there where he was at, there's some caves, not like super huge and deep. The main part was just a rock ledge overhang. But down at the bottom of it, it scooted back, and it went back about 15, 20 feet and opened up into a little bit bigger. And that's where he had hid. I don't know if that's where his family was. And, you know, I don't know. I still don't know what exactly happened. All I know is that the first time he saw me with a rifle, it freaked him out bad. My pistol was something that didn't bother him. But, it never heard it go off. All he had ever heard me shoot was my bow.
Right.
And it doesn't go bang. And that was the trick, because it was about a year later that I, because not quite a year, next hunting season. And it's like, crap, how do I bring this up? And I said, I brought pictures, and I showed him photographs of guns. And it's like, your mom and dad is this, trying to get across, did your mom and dad die because of this? And it took a long time, but then he finally realized what the picture was. And it's like, yeah, I got upset and angry and, destroyed that photograph. But, it wasn't anything important. It was something that I took, and just a bunch of different guns, pistol. He had seen my pistol, but he had never actually seen it out and I said, this right here, boom, boom, bad. Stay away from it. And from the day that we started, from that first time, it's like, I'm all right, but what happened to your mom and dad? Stay away from humans, because most of them are going to try to do what they did to your mom and dad to you. And me, I'm different, but you can't go to town with me, because they'll be mean to you. It's just me and you, we're friends. And crap, It
must have been so hard to get across to them, because from what I've learned from interaction with them, they just don't understand the concept of lying or that sort of thing at all.
I was just going to say that lying is a strictly human concept. Now, truth, brutally honest. Never once do you have to wonder if they're lying to you, because it is not even in their thought processes.
Yeah.
They have an excellent sense of humor, but it's like the old silent movie type. It's all a lot of physical comedy.
Yeah.
And now a joke, that is basically a funny lie. It doesn't, lie, no concept. It's what, when I heard you and Kat talking about on that show, it's like, okay, she knows. That right there, I didn't believe anything else. It's like, okay, she does understand that. And if somebody, that's something I listen for, if somebody said that they have had interaction, it's like the brutal truthfulness of them as a being, and that may seem weird, but look at my position and what I experienced. And I know it's a unique situation, and I didn't think there was anybody else in the world that would have anything near to mine, and that's why I'm so terrified to ever tell anybody. I told somebody else before I ever told my family. It was been within the last 6 months that I finally opened up to my family that I'd even seen one. Let alone they don't know this part yet.
It's not like the easiest story to tell, that's for sure.
And my brothers are like, why didn't you say something back then? I said, well, you remember when we were hunting and you said, did you hear that moose? Did that moose run by you? Because, when thing, the first one goes, rah, remember, they're about 2 miles away.
Right.
And you hear, it sounded like, 16 elephants coming up through the trees. What they heard was boom, 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 and they thought it was a moose running across the top of the ridge right behind them. And that was that thing in that bull elk running up the ridge where I was sitting. And they were 1.5 miles, 2 miles on either side of me, and they thought a bull moose was running behind them.
Wow.
And when Dad picked us back up, nobody got anything that day, obviously.
Well, when he did his frustrated yell, they must have heard that pretty well then.
I said I saw a young spiked bull, and they said, was that his sick bugle? And I said, yep. And he said it sounded like a lion roar that with a cold. And I said that was that spiked bull. And they said, did you hear that bull? Did you see a moose? Did you hear that? We think it was a moose that was running by. And I said, yeah, I heard it. I think it was I said, it could have been a moose. It sounded like an elephant running on a sponge. It's what they said. And it's like, man, that was from them being so far away, and the way the mountains distort sound.
Yeah,
that thing running that freight train sound coming up through the trees sounded like an elephant running on a sponge, a wet sponge, where they were. And then it sounded like a sick elk bugle when he goes, "Rah, you idiot." You know, he didn't say that, but that's the idea, you know. When he did that thing, it's a, man, he needs to grow up and learn how to bugle. Like, yep. And when I said, you know, when I said, you remember when we heard that bull or that bull moose run by, and then they said, yeah, and I said, well, it wasn't a moose. Well, what was it? And I said, it was a Bigfoot. And they're like, yeah, and I said, look at me. And you know me well enough to know, am I lying? No, I can't. When I'm actually telling a lie, I can't stop laughing. I am the world's worst. I give myself away every time. And I said, well, why didn't you say something that day if you knew that's what it was? I said, what would have happened if I would have told you right then that I just saw Bigfoot? What would have happened to me for the rest of my life if I would have said that back then?
Would have never heard the end of it.
Yeah, and they both were, you know, able to admit, okay, yeah. Said, well, just the way that you're being right now, see, you're still wanting to get into that. And you know what? I don't care if you ridicule me now. I'm old enough. I'm not a little kid anymore. With the evidence that's out there and the people that have come forward to see it, if you tell me that I'm insane or I'm an idiot for believing in it, joke's on you, because, you know, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt now that it's real. The cover-up that I think is going on, that just buffaloes me still. That it's obvious that you're trying to cover up something that can't be covered up, that 90% of the people know about and believe. The other people that say they don't believe in it, you know, in the back of their mind, they're like, well, you know, I'm one out of 6,000 that doesn't believe in Bigfoot.
Yeah, Bigfoot is so well known and part of cultural legendary here in the West at this point that more people believe that Bigfoot is real than actually believe that certain political candidates tell the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and the fact of the matter is, it is up in the percentages. There's like, you know, 25-30% of the American population is willing to concede that there's a pretty good chance that something like that is running around the woods. You've got thousands of eyewitnesses. You know, 4 or 5 new ones every week that are coming forward. That's not to mention all the ones that are seeing something and not coming forward.
Yeah, and, you know, if 1% of them is telling the truth.
If even one of them is telling the truth.
Well, even that. But if 1% of the hundreds of thousands of people that come forward every year, if only 1% of them is telling the truth, guess what? That means it's real. If one of them's telling the truth and everybody else is lying and hoaxing, that's the thing that always got me back then. Oh, it's a massive hoax. It's a worldwide hoax. Who is the mastermind that can get every person and all the people in every country in the world to be in on this hoax? Yeah, right. I mean, that you guys are, that's asinine.
Well, you know, we figured it out what it is. It's a big plot. The NBA is involved. All the basketball players, you notice, like, they're on the court and stuff during the winter. You never see Bigfoot during the winter. And then during the summer, they're not working. That's when they're wearing their shaggy uniforms, running around out in the woods, leaving giant fake tracks for us to find. And it's in their contract in the off-season. They got to be part of this secret society that's been around for thousands of years that fakes Bigfoot sightings all over the world.
So that's like Eddie Murphy. You remember that? Your wife's a Sasquatch, isn't she? She shaved her down and taught her to talk.
Yeah, you shaved the damn Sasquatch and just married it, didn't you? Just
Goody Goo Goo. Who said that?
He stuck his face in the water and pulled a fish out with his teeth and said, Goody Goo Goo.
Goody Goo Goo. Your wife's a Bigfoot, ain't she, Gus? But you know, there's, you know, what I just told you just barely scratched the surface of what I had experienced. And what I think is really cool, you know, not for me, but for them, is that everything that I know and I have experienced isn't touching, scratching the surface of what Kat has. I would love to be able to talk to her. Because, you know, going through my whole life like this until, you know, it was right at about a year ago is the first time I had ever opened up and said anything about this. And it was like the vice was taken off of my chest. You know, and I didn't realize that it was affecting me the way it was. But it is. And, you hear, listen to the channels. There's good ones and bad ones, but all of them that are listening to people without judgment are helping people. And you can hear somebody say that, and until first time you talk to somebody like that and they're able to open up and finally, after 30 plus years, say, I did see this. I mean, you can't understand how much it helps somebody like me that has had to keep that inside for so long because I'm afraid of the ridicule.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that the times have changed, because it took a good Christian man and turned him into an alcoholic and a mean alcoholic because of something that he saw that he had no control over, and he just made the mistake of asking for help. What happened? When he came to town, it's not like he's like, a Bigfoot pushed a tree over on me. He needed help because he was injured bad.
Yeah.
And he said the Sasquatch pushed the tree over on him. He was in his tent when it happened, but, he was pinned underneath the tree, and the thing was trying to get to him. And I don't know why, but it got the tree, was bigger than it could handle or something, but it got it to where after a couple hours, he was able to dig himself out, but it couldn't get him out, and it was in a position to where it couldn't really hurt him either. Yeah, I guess the tree was big enough. But here he is, injured bad. You can tell a tree fell on him. Half of him is a pancake. Mm-hmm. And when he gets to his vehicle and gets back to town, in the hospital, and says that's what happened. And from then on, every person in that town was relentless about ridicule. And it would just, turn a good person into a mean old drunk.
Yeah.
And it's something beyond his control. And I'm just so glad those times are now past. Now it's...
Well, I know this is sort of off the topic of Bigfoot, but I've actually done outreach to homeless people. And when you get to meet them firsthand and find out what their stories are, you find out, much to your surprise, that a lot of these people are not homeless because they're crazy drunks. They became homeless, and that turned them into crazy drunks. Yeah. Something horrible happened to them that completely destroyed their life, and as a result, they ended up with nothing on the street and had nothing else to look forward to and just became crazy drunks.
Yeah. Well, because... that's all there is. You ain't got enough money to do anything, but you can go buy a cheap bottle of wine and get drunk and forget about everything for the night. Yeah, I understand that too, but so many people don't. And you find out that those crazy homeless people that drunk there on the sidewalk, he's a person too.
We'll come back for another part on this. So, okay, folks, we're going to have to cut her short for time constraints here, but we are definitely going to be having Kevin back. Tell more about his interaction with his Squatchlet buddy and all the stuff that happened while he was interacting with him over the few years that he knew him, up to the point where he didn't see him anymore. And I'm sure that you guys are going to find this just as fascinating as I do. And thanks again for coming on the show and sharing this with us, Kevin. Really, really thrilled that you have the intestinal fortitude to come forward and tell the story. Most people just wouldn't.
Kind of blessing and a curse getting it off, but then, it brings back all that happened, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good thing.
Well, and, it's one of those stories that it needs to be told, whether people believe it or not. In the long run, as more information comes out, they're going to be able to vet some of the stuff that you're going to tell, and they're going to be able to know if you're telling the truth or not. And it's going to be one of those things like Al Osman, where everybody thought he was completely crazy. And now all the stuff that, the top researchers are coming up that completely matches with information he gave. So it's pretty hard to call him completely crazy at this point, because everything he came up with seems to match what we've come up with in intervening, 100 years.
Yeah.
We
told you about that. That's already without anybody knowing about that. Well, we'll get to that later, but you know what has been seen there that has freaked a couple people out. Well, that's for another show. I'll be quiet.
Okay, there's a cliffhanger for you guys. You hate me for those. So stay tuned. Come back for the next episode, and Kevin's going to tell us some more stories about his interaction with the young Squatchlet and some of the really cool things that happened there, and give us some more insight into the Sasquatch people in Idaho. And in the meantime, all you guys, you be nice. Pay it forward. Do like Kevin did. If somebody's starving, give them some food. Help them. Be nice to others. Always be safe. And, unless you just gave him a side of meat and he's sitting next to you at the campfire, for God's sakes, don't hug the Wookiee.